Hi everyone and welcome to the eighth part of an Astronomer reacts, or rather a to-be Astronomer reacts to a geocentrist movie. Now two things. First of all, quite a few days have passed since the last part, since part 7. I've had to do some things for work and I'm not on holidays anymore, so the next parts are going to be probably spread a bit further in between, so forgive me if I wanted to say anything and I forgot. The second thing I would like to mention is some quite interesting things I have seen on YouTube actually, which I didn't know previously, that there is actually a whole documentary about this movie and how people like Michio Kaku and Lawrence Krauss appeared in it. And it is fascinating, and it really shows at which length some people will go in order to make, well, really a lie seem plausible. I have linked it in every part. This other movie, which this has been known since 2014, so I'm fascinated about how people today, 9 years later, still cite this to me as evidence, or appear to be citing this to me as evidence for a geocentrist picture. Really, the people who referred this to me as, oh, this is interesting, you should look at it, really is a testament for me as to their general quality of information and their general readiness to critically examine their own sources. That is, yeah. Let's continue with the content, shall we?
One day, God comes down from above and says, look, these two great theories, relativity and the quantum theory, are wrong. What would I say? First of all, I would say, oh my God, all my published works are wrong. I mean, I'll have to look for another job. And
okay. When he says that those two published theories are wrong, this is again where science, the language behind science comes in. Those two theories are very much established and make great predictions. However, they have no limits, absolutely no limits. In quantum mechanics, it would be kind of the standard model and not finding the graviton and things like that. And for general relativity, it would be things like it not being compatible with quantum mechanics at very, very small scales, right? So those are the two things that we know that they have boundaries, right? We already know that. They pretend in this movie as if we say that they are perfect. They are very much not, right? So they have known boundaries, but every physical theory has known boundaries. Every law has its boundaries. For example, the Ohm's law of electric resistance, where the voltage is equal to the resistance times the God, what's the English word? I do apologize. The current is exactly. The resistance times the current is the voltage, right? This is Ohm's law. We know that Ohm's law has a temperature dependence, but it assumes that it isn't there. And in the first approximation for your everyday applications, this holds perfectly. Only when you get down to extremely precise measurements, when you really need to know the conductivity of the metal you have and things like that, this becomes important. Then you need to go further. You need to take the temperature dependence into account and things like that. So the Ohm's law, even though it is called a law, very, 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 very strictly speaking, is wrong. But we know exactly when it turns wrong, so we can use it until it becomes wrong to great effects and with great accuracy.
I've heard people say that the reason they don't want to publish papers that disagree with special relativity or general relativity is that they built their careers on this, and that it would be admitting a major mistake.
But second,
we know that he's a scientist, right? So I'd be curious to which people said that. Also, if you were to publish a paper on special, like on something that disagrees with special relativity, and it turns out that you are correct, you will maybe even get the Nobel Prize for this, right? So this is exactly what most scientists try to do, is to publish papers that disagree with established theory, because then they've really changed something, then they found something new. I call bullshit on what he said before. Apology for my rude language.
Of all, once I collect my wits, I would simply say, but of course. You see, we are approaching truth, but can you actually get to absolute truth?
If you were paranoid,
That is an interesting question. Can we actually get to the absolute truth? I have had a very interesting discussion with one of my professors from university. He was the one that taught us the intro to quantum mechanics, and I asked him a few questions because, frankly, I understood quantum mechanics rather poorly, especially in the beginning. And our conversation kind of drifted to where we more or less talked about science and complexity, and he said, well, maybe he doesn't put it beyond possibility that maybe the things that we try to describe with physics are so complex that we really can't describe them with the maths that we currently have, or that they become infinitely more complex at every kind of new discovery, right? But the important thing is that we need to focus, that we can describe them good enough. But maybe we will never come to a really true prediction, even if it may seem so. Which is one of the core tenets of science, is that everything must be able to be disproven. This is very, very important. Nothing is proven because everything needs to be disputed. Everything needs to be disprovable. Science doesn't prove, science only disproves. Okay, let's keep going.
you'd say there's a conspiracy. Whatever it is,
As I mentioned in a previous part, conspiracy! The big final triumphant card that people who have no idea what they're talking about play.
there is a lot of resistance to getting something published that disagrees with either of Einstein's two theories.
Absolutely not. If I, in my future research, am to find something that disagrees with general relativity, in a sense that not only if it disagrees with that, it makes a different prediction than general relativity, and this prediction turns out to be true, I will be extremely highly regarded in the scientific community. This would be a very big thing. So it's just plainly wrong what he said there. Also, I know a few professors that would be super glad if they could publish something that would disagree with general relativity. Sadly, however, their findings align rather perfectly with general relativity. Just putting it out there.
By the end of the 1920s, astronomer Edwin Hubble, working with the large 100-inch telescope atop Mount Wilson outside Los Angeles, had established that our galaxy was only one of many galaxies in the universe. His observations presented serious new challenges to the Copernican principle.
Well, he looks through his telescope.
Hubble's big discovery was the cosmological constant, amongst other things. It is also called the Hubble constant now, because it is attributed to him. Hubble made a few very important observations in regards to cosmology. Around the same time, there was also the great debate amongst astronomy, which kind of tried to determine what galaxies are and if they are close or if they're really, really far away and just huge. There's a whole thing about it. Look it up, the great debate, if you can. It's an interesting part of astronomical history.
And he sees galaxies for the first time. We had powerful telescopes back then. And not only does he see galaxies, but he sees these galaxies with what they call redshift. The wavelength of the light is now being stretched, so you see more red than you see blue.
Redshift.
Exactly. Redshift really it is due to the Doppler effect, if you will. When an object is moving away from you, its light wave is kind of stretched because it is emitted by something that's moving away from you, and that's called redshift. And we can see redshift in every direction we look, right? So it would appear as if the universe would expand from Earth outwards. However, the predictions that actually were made by Einstein, and Einstein didn't like those predictions, by the way. He tried to hide them in his equations because he didn't like them. But he can't hide the truth in some convoluted equations. People quickly figured out what these equations would predict. So in these equations, Einstein predicted that space itself would expand, right? By that he means that from every point, the distance to every other point, assuming that they didn't move previously, would expand, right? It's as if we were imagine that you have a drawing, you draw a few things on top of a balloon, and then you blow up the balloon, and suddenly everything moves away from everything else. This was the big prediction, and we are actually able to see exactly that. So that aligns perfectly with general relativity. It's actually one of the predictions of late general relativity.
A shift in the wavelength of light toward the red, or lower energy end of the spectrum, giving the appearance that the light has either lost energy or has had its wavelength stretched by some physical force, as in the expansion of space.
It is not necessarily by force. I don't know why they have to put it in a physical force. It's just relative velocity. That is absolutely sufficient for an explanation here. It can be due to a force, right? If you send a light beam away from a gravitational potential, so let's say you point a laser pointer just up into the sky, and if you would measure it at great height, you could actually detect a difference in wavelength between your laser pointer and the laser pointer in the sky, merely due to the gravity acting on the photons. It's not gravity, this is general relativity. This is a bit advanced. Look up the Harvard Tower experiment. I believe I mentioned it previously, where they were able to measure this effect in the 60s, 70s, something of that sort.
An amazing law. We look out at other galaxies. On average, they're moving away from us. And those that are twice as far away are moving twice as fast. And those that are 3 times as far away are moving 3 times as fast. And of course, that makes us look like we're the center of the universe, but it's not true. It just means the universe is expanding uniformly.
Now, he
Pretty much, yeah.
struggled with this. He didn't know whether to say that the redshift was a velocity indicator, that is, that the galaxies are being stretched apart from us, and that's why the wavelength of that light is being stretched so we see red, or it could be something else, you see. But he was pressured a lot by the Copernican principle.
Wow, that's a blatant lie. At the time when I mean, there were ideas that because when you're looking like 1 million light years away, you're really looking 1 million years in the past. Some people had the idea that maybe galaxies in the past just looked way redder due to some difference going on in star formation. However, this was very, very quickly disbanded when we figured out more things about stars, and that the average lifetime of a star is in the order of 10 million, no, billion with a B, 10 billion years. So within 1 million year, nothing would change with the average star, right? So this got quickly disbanded. The thing that like the prevailing thought from the very beginning is that space is just expanding as Einstein predicted. So really no pressuring is going on here with the Copernican principle. It would fit his narrative if it was, though.
To say, well, okay, let's say it's a velocity factor. The redshift is a velocity factor. And yet, I'm not quite comfortable with that because that puts us in the center.
Such a condition would imply that we occupy a unique position in the universe, analogous, in a sense, to the ancient conception of a central Earth. This hypothesis...
Once again, I will Google this quote, because as we know from previous parts that they have been rather uncordial with their quotes, really. So yeah, such a condition could imply that we occupy a unique position. Such a condition could, or is it would imply that we occupy a unique, I do apologize, unique position. I just want to know what again they are hiding with this quote, really. Caltech, that is a reputable source. All right. I'm looking for the word imply. The assumption of uniformity has to be said in its favor. If distribution were not uniform, it would either increase with distance or decrease, but we would not expect to find a distribution in which the density increases with distance symmetrically in all directions. Such a condition would imply that we occupy a unique position in the universe, analogous, in a sense, to the ancient conception of a central Earth. This hypothesis cannot be disproven, but is unwelcome and would be accepted only as a last resort in order to save the phenomenon. Therefore, disregarding this possibility and consider the alternative, namely a distribution which thins out with distance. So this really, they hid again some stuff. I'm unfamiliar with this quote, to be completely frank with you. I believe they are talking about the uniformity of some nebular distribution, exactly, are not interpreted as velocity shifts. Okay, that is interesting. So I'm unsure about how to do this. I will read up briefly and I will explain it in the next part, since we're already at 15 minutes again. Hello, and welcome back to an addendum to part 8. Literally the next result, right? I clicked on the Caltech one, because this seems to be, a reputable source. Right below that, there is a thing. Misquoting Hubble. Now, when we look at it, by the way, there's also the Flat Earth Wiki. So really, again, they have picked a quote, right? Here, Dr. Danny Faulkner, he says creationists frequently quote Edwin Hubble to the effect that he inserted the cosmological principle into cosmology to avoid stark realties, I do apologize, about the universe that his data implies. However, careful consideration of these quotes within their proper context reveals a very different story. Rather than exhibiting bias or desperation, Hubble's quotes indicate the cautious approach of an observational astronomer. Now, the thing is here. Those are some of the quotes. They stopped. You can read up on how it is actually explained. Here are Hubble's quotes in context, right? So here he talks about these two quotes that were, one of which we have here, right? So you can actually read up on how creationists misconstrue it, and you need to get into quite a bit of mathematics and hear what all of these variables mean. I highly encourage you to do this. I will just read you the conclusion. Harnett, the creationist, has misinterpreted Hubble's quotes. Part of the problem may be that creationists have misunderstood the viewpoint of Hubble's later book, An Observational Approach to Cosmology. It reads very differently from Hubble's earlier book from just a year before. In his latter book, Hubble attempted to convey his work from the perspective of an observational astronomer. When read apart from their context, the oft-quoted words of Hubble sound like a damning admission of extreme and even desperate bias. But when considered in context, Hubble's words amount to an honest and open exploration of many possibilities. I discourage creationists from using these quotes from Hubble any other way. So I find it humorous once again that they went out on a limb to pick quotes from people that know what they're talking about and try to make them fit their conclusions, which by the way is inductive reasoning, right? We talked about this earlier. Yeah. So once again, this movie here is kind of lying, really. So that's a whole thing in and of itself.